What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. On today's episode I'm going to show you how to replace your transmission cooler in your 2002 to 2005 Ford Explorer. It'll work whether you have the 4.0 V6 or the 4.6 liter V8. Now one thing I just want to teach you real quick, the number one killer of automatic transmissions is heat. The 5R55 transmission is garbage to begin with, so we always want to make sure it's running cool enough. My transmission cooler is leaking, so I'm going to replace it, and I also have an aftermarket transmission cooler in front of the condenser looped into the system, which I'll show you how to run. They're about $35 on eBay, and it's worth every penny knowing that your transmission is running cool. So follow these steps and it'll be nice and easy. Let's get started. Okay, so an unfortunate series of events is that we have to remove the radiator out of this truck to get to the transmission cooler. Now on the 06 to 10, it's like 2 bolts and a radiator comes out. These are 8mm bolts that go from this side, and you literally have a very hard time getting to them. So what we're gonna do first is we're just gonna lift this shroud up out of the way. You guys might have a top cover piece. I didn't put mine back in, but it literally just pops over these grommets. You just pull up, we could get that off to the side. Now if you look closely over here, there are these plastic channels, and behind this channel is the 8mm bolt that you have to get out. So what I use is an 8mm ratcheting wrench. You get that in that way, you get that in that way. Now down below is a nightmare, so I'll show you guys what I do. It'll work. It's not the best, it's kind of a hack way around it, but it'll do. So we'll start up top and we'll work our way down. So your first step is to remove this upper shroud here. You have two 10mm bolts, one there and one over here. Okay, go to the side, up. Keep that off to the side. Okay guys, so for this procedure you don't need to remove your clutch fan, but I'm going to get it out of the way and for demonstration purposes. So many people ask me, how do you remove the clutch fan? So here are the two tools I use. Okay, this one's a power built 58mm. This one's a performance tool model W80585. I got this and one of these in a toolkit at Advanced Auto Parts made specifically for Ford vehicles. So it's very simple. You just put the big fork over the bolts to the water pump. You put your wrench on the fan clutch, like so. All you gotta do is break it loose and it'll spin right off. I'd also just like to make mention, there's supposed to be a lower shield down here, but when I put my motor back in, I hooked up the lower radiator hose and filled the radiator with coolant before I could figure out that the shield must go on first. So mine's off, it's in the garage. You guys are gonna have the same process at the bottom. Two 10mm bolts, and with the clutch fan out of the way, it'll make it super simple to pull up and out. All right, gang, under the car passenger side, there is our drain for our radiator. I just got a pair of channel locks, and if you can see, boy, oh boy, the entire bottom of this is caked with transmission fluid. So that's how I know my trans cooler is leaking, okay? So we are gonna now drain the radiator, and then we can go back up top. And a little trick to help it speed up, you just go ahead, open up this cap. Instead of it pulling a vacuum, now the air goes in and it'll drain quicker. So what I do, just personal preference, I keep a gauge, I look at the level, and then once I see the level in the overflow tank is lower than the thermostat housing, that's how I know I can start taking off the upper radiator hose and the overflow line. All right, so with the coolant draining, you can actually squeeze this and feel whether or not there's still water left in it. At this point, there's no more water left in it, so we can go ahead and undo this clamp, that clamp, and then that clamp underneath, and we can remove our radiator hose up top. Okay, so with the upper radiator hoses out of the way, now we have this one here, and we have this one here that goes to the bottom of the overflow tank, but we need to wait until the radiator is completely done draining in order to take those off. So in the meantime, we can start the absolute painstaking process of removing the two upper 8mm bolts, and I'm going to show you now how I do it. What I do is I take my 8mm little ratcheting wrench. You literally have to slip down in there like this. See, I already got it on it, and start loosening it. Now guys, I highly recommend you wear like some sort of, not like vinyl gloves, but like those leather work gloves, because going up and down against the ribs of this radiator will literally slice your knuckles open, and I've done it many times. So for pain's sake, just put a pair of gloves on. So we got this one over here we're doing now, and then we can go ahead and do this one. And keep an eye on your bucket, make sure it doesn't overflow all over your driveway. Okay, so as previously explained, I just got this bolt out using my little 8mm ratcheting wrench, and now I can go ahead and start working on this side. Again, this piece of plastic, you just got to bend down like that. Then you can get your wrench on in there and start ruining your day. Okay, so I got the top two undone, and I never put the bottoms in. Nice. Okay, so that's good for educational purposes. All right, so let me just get this up in position. Okay guys, so with our top two bolts out, I still have to wait for the coolant to finish up before I can do the bottom two hoses. But just for educational purposes, on this side, it's gonna be the same story up here. There's one more down there. And the way I get at it is I go through this valance here, and then there's like a little flimsy plastic piece that moves, and I get a real long extension down in there, 8mm. This one you can't get at because the condenser's in the way. So I'm gonna show you what to do. Okay, so basically it's very much not the right thing to do, and it's very much wrong. But I take an angle grinder and I cut into the bottom of my rad support, okay? And you can, right on the other side of this little incision is the bolt, okay? And you get your little 8mm ratcheting wrench in there and you pull the bolt out, and I've never put the bolt back in. As many times as I needed to take the radiator out, I have, and I never put the bolt back in. So 3 will hold it. Don't worry about the 4th, and just get the damn thing out of there so you can continue your day. All right, guys, so once your coolant is done draining, you can undo your 2 lower radiator hoses. And I would just like to make a note real quick. Please put your old antifreeze in a safe environment. Where I live, we have bunnies running around the backyard, and on a day like today where it's 97 degrees, they will drink this and they will die. So please put it in a safe container and take it to your local recycling center. At this point in time, the radiator's disconnected. I got the 2 bottom bolts out, did the little trick with the cutting, and that bolt was removed. That one's not too bad down there because, like I said, you go from the front, and then now we can take our radiator and pull right up and out. All right, with our radiator out, here is our transmission cooler in all of her glory. Here are the 2 connections. Now, what I just want to show you real quick, do you see these 2 lines here? You see them? Come on, let me get a little closer. You see them? Okay, good. All right, these 2 lines normally come right out and go whoop, 1, second one, whoop, 2, with 2 hose clamps. Now in your case, all you'd have to do is undo those 2 hose clamps, slide them off, put your new trans cooler in, and slide those 2 hoses back on. But I'm not like that. I run all sorts of cool aftermarket transmission coolers and whatnot, and right now I have the system looped into my Hayden Trans Saver. As you can see, where is it? Oh, right there. Because the transmission cooler has been dead and I still needed to drive the truck. So I just looped them around into my aftermarket one. So now we can go back into the original because I have a new original. So what we need to do now is we need to loosen the 2 transmission cooler bolts. And all you have to do is get your little 8mm ratcheting wrench again, get it right in there. You have plenty of room to do so. Same thing on this side. Peel this plastic back. Got the one right there. Go from the inside and you will be perfect. Jeez Louise. Okay, there it is. We got the old one out. Okay, so at this point in time, all you guys have to do is put your new transmission cooler in. You can go ahead and put your two 8mm bolts in, and if you're just replacing it like for like, the two hoses that came out, you simply connect and put a nice new worm gear style clamp on, tighten it down real good. But I just removed my grill so I could show you. This is my aftermarket Hayden Trans-Saver transmission cooler. Now I have two lines, 3/8 coming down. They go down here, through, and then through this plastic I made a little cutout with some snips, and then the hoses go through that way. Then they come around out of here, and then it brings us to where we need to make the connections. So if you do not want an aftermarket transmission cooler, you can go ahead, put your new cooler in and go like for like. If you do want an aftermarket transmission cooler, I'm going to show you how to hook these lines up from up top. All right, so here I got this new to me trans cooler. I didn't buy it brand new because I didn't want to pay $130 on eBay, and I had a parts explorer in the driveway with a good trans cooler. So what we can do now is we can simply get our transmission cooler down into position. With that done, we can go ahead and we can take our two 8mm bolts and we can put them back in, fasten our transmission cooler down. All right, so now it's time to plumb the lines together. As we can see, we got our new trans cooler in place. Now, very simply, the top line goes right into the top of the trans cooler. Now, if you're not doing an aftermarket trans cooler, your bottom line will go right there into the bottom trans line. So, in my case, because I have an aftermarket transmission cooler, we got the top going into the top. Then we're gonna go out into one hose that goes up to our transmission cooler up here, and then out of the top transmission cooler down and into that bottom line that goes right back to the transmission. And the way I splice those together is I get a brass 3/8 barb connector with two hose clamps, nice and tight, no leaks. So all I have to do now is simply take this line here and plumb it right to the bottom of our transmission cooler and tighten our clamps down. All right, back on the Explorer after a couple errands and a nice joyride in the Lexus done. I got everything tightened down, our lines are done, trans cooler's in. All we have to do now is put our radiator back in. Now what I'm gonna do right quick is hit this with some sort of degreaser and clean it off. Jeez Louise, I had no idea it was this caked up in mud and whatnot. So I'm gonna clean this off and then we'll get this back in. Beautiful things. Beautiful things. You guys know the old saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, I'm going back in the house. Put a floor jack under the radiator because like it just drops. Because the third gen Explorers, it doesn't have like a cleat to sit on, so the thing just drops. So put a floor jack under it and then start lifting it up so you can start getting your bolt holes aligned. And then once the radiator's like in and somewhat aligned, you can start taking your 8mm bolts. Okay, good, I lost both of them. And putting them in. So good luck, try to start them through this way. Ugh. All right, so once you got your radiator in, bolted down, remember, put your bottom shroud in before you put on your lower radiator hose. So we just have that hose left, and then the one on the bottom on that side left. And then we can put our fan on, our upper shroud on, these two hoses, and fill her up. All right guys, so once you got everything back together, fan clutch on, hoses on, shrouds on, we can go ahead and we can start filling our radiator, fill it all the way to the top, and then once it's at the top, I just burp it like this. Keep your eye on your gauge, make sure you're not overheating. The Explorers like to have hot spots, especially if the thermostat doesn't have a small hole drilled into it. When I replace mine, I drill a small hole to purge the air out. So you need to keep an eye on your gauges, it will overheat. And always keep an eye on those connections down there. Make sure they're nice and tight, make sure they're not leaking. Other than that, you're pretty much good to go. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this helps somebody out there, and stay tuned for more videos. Peace.